Why did Earth win the lottery of life and Venus and Mars didn't? The explanation nobody told you. The hell of Venus wasn't always red, when it had oceans and nobody knew. Imagine a planet full of clouds, warm oceans, and a dense but manageable atmosphere. Now imagine that planet is not Earth, but Venus. Yes, the same toxic hell where lead melts like butter. But there was a time when Venus seemed to have everything it needed to become a paradise. Unlike now, when it behaves like a giant smelting furnace, in its beginnings it was probably an aquatic world and habitable. At least, until everything went downhill. Welcome to Mind Blown Space, the channel where science mixes with cosmic sarcasm and questions that textbooks prefer to dodge. If you like space mysteries, you know what to do. Stay and activate your neurons. Venus, billions of years ago, was at the center of the habitable zone of the solar system. Not at the edges like now. It had an acceptable temperature, water on the surface, and clouds that could have contained rain. What could go wrong? Well, basically, everything. The planet never had a moon to stabilize its axis, nor did it develop a magnetic field to protect it from the solar wind. Result, its atmosphere collapsed, water vapor broke down into oxygen and hydrogen, the hydrogen escaped into space, and the oxygen oxidized. End of story. Some scientists suggest that, at a critical moment, Venus suffered a runaway greenhouse effect. Temperatures rose, the water evaporated completely, and the surface was buried under an atmospheric pressure worthy of an interplanetary torture novel. Instead of evolving into an Eden, it ended up as a deranged pressure cooker. And to make it more interesting, there are no visible traces of rivers, seas, or oceans, but also no evidence denying them. What if life did emerge there, but didn't have time to develop? Or worse, what if it did, and was then annihilated by its own planet? Venus could have been the promise that was never fulfilled, a floating warning with the name of a goddess. And yes, there are still those who believe that some Venusian bacterium managed the miracle of escaping on a meteorite. But we'll talk about that when we visit Earth. Mars, the planet that almost made it, and then gave up. For decades, Mars was the spoiled child of science fiction. Artificial canals, ancient civilizations, cosmic messages. Everything was possible on the red planet, until real science showed up with a telescope in one hand and a fire extinguisher of hope in the other. What we found was not an alien metropolis, but a rocky desert drier than a bankrupt bachelor's fridge. But watch out, because Mars did have its moment of glory. In the Noachian period, more than 3 billion years ago, the planet had water. And not just a drop or two to brag about on TikTok, but entire oceans, lakes, glaciers, and meandering rivers. In its northern basin, an ocean could have covered much of the northern hemisphere. And what did Mars do with that opportunity? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The reason? Mars was born with a problem of gravitational self-esteem. Its size is small, its gravity weak, and that condemned it from the beginning. Without enough mass to maintain a dense atmosphere or an active core to sustain a magnetic field, the solar wind slowly faded over millennia. Literally. Every burst from the sun carried away molecules, water vapor, and any attempt at stability. And as if that weren't enough, Mars didn't have a decent moon either. Its two small satellites, Phobos and Deimos, are basically floating potatoes. They provide no axial stability, no tides, nothing that sounds like future civilization. They just orbit there, as if waiting for someone to pick them up in an interplanetary second-hand sale. When the Noachian period ended, the fall began. Its atmosphere became thinner than a whisper, and the temperature plummeted. Although there are still underground aquifers trapped under the permafrost, Mars no longer has the strength to melt itself. Today, the red planet is nothing more than a testimony of lost potential. The eternal, almost. And in case you're wondering, yes, there are those who believe microbial life may have existed. But even those poor microbes must have looked at the sky and thought, seriously, we were born here? By the way, if this interplanetary trip is blowing your mind as much as its name suggests, show some love to the channel. Subscribe, comment, or share this video with someone who still thinks Mars was the universe's secret garden. Earth, the perfect disaster that ended up generating life. And now, let's come back home. Earth, that chunk of rock with water that achieved what neither Venus nor Mars could: manufacture life, evolve it, and turn it into people who make choreographies for social media. But let's not get sidetracked. Why here and not there? Well, get ready, because what you're about to hear doesn't sound like divine design, but rather like a chain of coincidences so absurd that not even Hollywood would dare to write them. First, we had a brutal collision with a Mars-sized planet called Theia. Yes, just like that. No anesthesia. That impact didn't destroy us, but helped form our moon. And what does that moon do? It stabilizes our axis, generates tides, keeps the planet in thermal and emotional balance. Well, not emotional, but you get the point. Without that galactic accident, today we'd probably be a clone of Venus with lots of vapor and zero evolution. Second, we have a magnetic field. Why? Because Earth's outer core is still agitated, moving like a blender in apocalypse mode. That generates the famous dynamo effect, an invisible shield that protects us from the solar wind. What disappeared without glory in Venus and Mars stayed here as a night watchman. And yes, that makes the difference between having an atmosphere or watching it slowly escape into space. Third, Earth landed right in the habitable zone. Destiny? Coincidence? A solar system bug? Call it whatever you like. It worked. We're neither too close nor too far from the sun, and that has allowed liquid water to remain stable for eons. Water. That little detail no other rock has managed to handle with dignity. Fourth, our atmosphere evolved. It went from being a toxic soup of carbon dioxide and ammonia to a breathable mix thanks to some microscopic organisms that invented photosynthesis. And with it came oxygen. And with oxygen came evolutionary chaos. Goodbye anaerobes, hello explosion of life. In short, Earth won the cosmic lottery, not by having the best tickets, but because it knew how to take advantage of every hit, every mistake, and every catastrophe. Sometimes, life doesn't need a master plan. It just needs a good alignment of geological accidents. 3 planets, one same beginning, and an ending to cry about or laugh, if you're sarcastic. Venus, Mars, and Earth began as cosmic triplets. They were born more or less at the same time, shared the same neighborhood in the solar system, and for quite a while seemed to be heading down the same path. But no. Life, as always, decided to do its own thing. One was turned into a pressurized oven, another into a frozen desert, and this one was turned into a sphere full of selfies, absurd wars, and song charts. The story is not just about favorable conditions, it's about how those conditions change over time. Venus, being closer to the sun, was warmer from the start, but it had no moon to help stabilize it and no magnetic field to defend it from the solar wind. And when its water evaporated, the atmosphere went crazy. Temperatures rose, carbon dioxide ran wild, and the planet locked itself in a vicious cycle of heat, pressure, and destruction. Basically, the cosmic equivalent of an existential crisis with no way back. Mars, on the other hand, started with water, ice, and an atmosphere that gave hope. But it lacked mass. It lacked drive. It lacked everything. Its core cooled, its magnetic shield collapsed, and its atmosphere disintegrated until the planet was left more exposed than someone sharing family secrets at Christmas dinner. And so, slowly, it became the red ruin that today we photograph so much with satellites that look like they're doing galactic tourism. And Earth held on. It suffered, yes. It heated up, it froze, it was struck, shaken, even almost split in two. But each disaster sowed the seed of something more. Events that on other planets would have been the end, here were the beginning. The magnetic field, plate tectonics, climate cycles. Each element joined forces as if it knew that one day someone would ask, why us? Today, as we send robots to explore our former planetary companions, reality hits. The miracle is not that life arose, but that it survived. That it flourished on a world that, for reasons we still don't fully understand, endured when the others collapsed. So next time you look at the night sky, remember, Mars and Venus were also in the race, but only one crossed the finish line. Thank you for making it this far, interplanetary traveler. If this story made you see Earth with new eyes, subscribe to Mindblown Space, leave your comment, and share this video with someone who still thinks all this was just pure luck. See you in the next orbit.